nice neighborhood. When I came back, it was ravaged by crack and drugs, and it's in the middle of the hood. And here I was at the university with these high-level skills that I got from Michigan Department of Transportation while I worked there. So I put those two things together, my work background and my growing up in the hood together, and started doing environmental justice work, environmental justice in transportation. And so I've been doing that since 2000, and that's how long I've been at Morgan. So I've been working for about 40 years.
Wow. So, all right, we got an expert on the line. And Will, tell us more about you, your family, how you love living in Detroit. Tell us everything. I want to know.
All right.
Some organized together, but I feel like I just need to know Will more. And I'm waiting.
It's interesting because I think that in some ways, even though it was maybe 10 or 15 years later, my story also parallels Glenn in the sense that I often think about the fact that if I wasn't from Detroit, I'd probably be off somewhere making a whole bunch of money. But it was something about growing up in Detroit, something about having the family that you have, seeing the people that you see, knowing the things that that at least for me, I wanted to do something about what I eventually learned was an injustice, and what I eventually saw was an injustice in this place that I'm from. You know what I'm saying? In this place, growing up post crack, you know what I'm saying? When I was a kid, you know what I'm saying? And seeing in many ways the social decimation, it became a lifelong thing to figure out how to get to the root of this and how to, make my contribution. Both of my parents are Southerners. They didn't move to Detroit until the 70s. My mom's from Georgia. My dad's from Mississippi. Both of them have lived a portion of their life under segregation, you know what I'm saying? And so in our house, having a Black consciousness, being aware that there were historical injustices, that even continued to the present day, was very much something I grew up with, even though I was born in Michigan. I have a son who's 8 years old. I'm a Orisha priest of Shango and a hip hop artist. And as you mentioned, pledged 24 years ago in Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, almost this exact day. The anniversary is coming up in just a couple days.
Oh, wow. Well, happy anniversary, and I'll post that on your Facebook if you put it out.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to tell you, my father is Alpha.
Okay.
Well, he just passed away, but he's Alpha.
Okay.
So I thought I'd add that in there.
I should.
All right. And Glenn, I'm sorry. Condolences to you and your family on the passing of your father.
Yeah, it was a tough time it's always tough to die, but this was particularly rough because you couldn't bury him we had to postpone the funeral for like 3 times. He passed away March the 7th, and we buried him April the 13th.
Wow.
So, but and it was streamed, and it was a nice, dignified event. So, but I'll also add, I had 2 children. My son he just graduated from Morgan State University with an industrial engineering degree. He's 33, so he's probably closer to you guys' age than I am. And I have a daughter who's lives, graduate from Michigan State, by the way.
Okay.
And she's in San Diego, up in the mountains, running the Girl Scouts camp.
I was a Girl Scout troop leader. That's awesome.
Yeah, I come from a family of florists. So my dad had a law degree, but my grandparents were florists. And so after my father retired, he went into the florist business. So we were the oldest African American florists in Baltimore for many, many years. The business was started in 1930.
Mm.
So that sort of adds a little bit more, dimension to, how I got to be where I am.
So yeah, could you explain more about, what brought you to the environmental and climate justice movement? Like, why did you focus on transportation? And will I have?
Well, I worked I was a transportation travel demand forecaster for the state of Michigan. But when I came back home to Baltimore, I couldn't understand how it had declined the way it had. And I was troubled by that. I knew, my family knew a lot of politicians, so I felt, I said, how could these people who we know allow this to happen? So that was like an eye opener for me, in that the politicians were, people who were, governed by different constraints than I realized as an idealistic, young man growing up. So because I had the travel demand forecasting skills, that gave me some credibility, instant credibility, in with certain agencies, regional planning, Baltimore City Transportation. So there aren't too many African Americans who do travel demand forecasting. So so that gave me a leg up. And then I was looking for some funds to do my research, and I ran into some folks at EPA who said I needed a group, I needed a posse, I needed people to work with on the ground. So I was, able, because I'm from East Baltimore, I was able to and I worked at Morgan, I could gather, researchers and community activists together as a group, and that seemed to have, worked out pretty good. So we had community groups, we had folks from Johns Hopkins, Center for Neighborhood Technology in Chicago. I was a member of the Transportation Research Board, Environmental Justice and Transportation Committee. So I had some, some folks there that I worked with, and we were all able to band together and get some money and develop this environmental justice toolkit. So that's how I got there.
Okay. All right. And Will, could you talk more on your experience in the environmental and climate justice movement? Like, how did you get involved? I hear that question a lot from organizers or just people in the field. Like, how did you land to do environmental justice work? Were you impacted by an EJ issue, or is just something that you started to be passionate about? Oh, you're muted. Okay.
Are we good now?
Yep.
All right. I was in graduate school on my way to a PhD around 1999, 2000, 2001. And a friend of mine introduced me to the work of Grace Lee Boggs and the work that she had done in Detroit, talking about the future from rebuilding community and the need to rebuild community and rebuild the bonds that hold community together. And from there, that kind of brought me into, I guess you could say, grassroots activism in Detroit. And as somebody that's had health conditions since I was about 12 years old, I just was able to connect the dots between environment and health, and seeing, I guess you could say, so much sickness in the community, so much illness, connecting those dots to what does it mean to have a strong and healthy community. And so I saw that environmental was really a central point. And I use I don't use the strict definition of environment where people talk about like only the air or only the water.
Right.
When we do environmental justice, we say, what's your environment?
Right.
We want to bring justice to our entire environment, which can include the transportation, it could include the food, it can include the schools, it can include what might be called urban planning, all of those type of things, and so that was kind of how we got into it. And one of the real turning points that helped me add something new to that was Hurricane Katrina. And Hurricane Katrina, the more I remember Spike Lee made that video, but even before that, you had I think it was called the Superdome. You had seeing people stranded. You had how people were being treated at gunpoint, just trying to, find security for themselves and their family. But then once people started breaking down the science of it, then you could see that the social inequities of how Africans, how Black folks are treated here, meets with the science of those storms got stronger and stronger because the natural environment had been worn away from all the pollution and all the development and everything. Those storms weren't supposed to even, be that strong 10, 20, 30, 40 years before that. The development and all these things wore away the natural barriers, wore away the natural resources. So the science was on one side, the societal neglect is on another side. And that really hits home for Detroit because we see societal neglect all around us.
Right.
And so that just made me like, wow, this climate is deep, man, because when the stuff hits the fan, it's our people that get caught up in the suffering, and the climate is, you know what I'm saying? That's one specific example, but it's a huge example. And so Katrina helped me to tie in the environmental with the social, with the climate all together.
Thank you so much for letting us know about the intersectionality of all these different issues. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more later on about COVID and environmental justice and how it's connected. So Glenn, I wanted to ask you, with transportation being one of the contributors to climate change and economic injustices for people who live in urban communities who do not have access to dependable transportation, by the way, what has been some limitations or obstacles you have seen with trying to get community members, elected officials, government officials to focus more on clean and equitable transportation?
Well, I'm going to try to answer that, but I want to piggyback in on what Will said a little bit.
Okay.
Environmental justice, is really about low-income minority communities not being taken advantage of by federal agencies who spend money. Like building, I think in Detroit, where they ran the highways through, African-American neighborhoods, was it 696 up there?
Bunch of different 75, 96, 94.
Yeah.
Right. So the environmental justice movement came out of that type of activity at the federal government level. In Baltimore, and so there was a transit depot, and this transit depot was located next to an alley that was adjoined by low-income housing. It was residential housing, but it was folks with low income. And so back in the day when they were running buses on diesel, they would back the buses up and have the tailpipes facing the alleys. And when diesel, they would just have to run the bus all night long because it would take too long to start up in the cold weather. And so what it amounted to was that it caused respiratory illness, for people who were in close proximity. Usually there's like a plume, an energy or a pollution plume. It spews out of the tailpipe and then it goes for about 300 feet. So that's when, when we grew up, we didn't even know that was an issue. And then we got a little bit of education and became, aware of what's going on. So, so the other part of that coin is that bus facilities, are often located in close proximity to low-income communities, and they cause physical respiratory, disease. Also, low-income minorities often live closer or in close proximity to highways, where you have a lot of a lot of traffic, and they're within 300 feet. So you're walking around breathing dirty air and you don't even know it. Okay. Now the kicker is that in terms of COVID-19, areas that are low-income areas that are in close proximity to to air pollution are often those folks are often at greater risk for having respiratory disease, obesity, asthma, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But those are the key ones, okay? And research has recently come out showing that if you have a weakened immune system because you have respiratory illness, obesity, okay, asthma, that you're more likely to be attacked by the virus. Okay, so here we are again, from Katrina to COVID and before and after, and nothing has changed. As a matter of fact, the COVID shows us that we're more vulnerable than, it really shows the fractures, okay, structural racism associated with, living in America. So is that,
No, that's fine. But I'm gonna bring Will in the conversation about COVID. Of course, is prevalent in Black communities, as you have stated. Like Detroit, right? We had we were like number 3 when I think we moved up to number 7. So how can we let people know that COVID-19 is also an EJ issue? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that COVID-19, for those people that care about EJ, it's an EJ issue. It's a Black issue. It's an African issue. It's a public issue. It's a democracy issue. It's all sorts of different types of issues. You know what I'm saying? It's all sorts of different types of issues. But it's an environmental justice issue related in the same way. I'll put it this way, my perspective, which I'm getting deeper and deeper into, because I've been getting more and more active in the disability justice movement. And environmental justice is a health issue.
Right.
Environmental justice, when we talk about the effects of these environmental injustices, we point out the cancer, the asthma, the kidney failures, the organ failures, the sicknesses. And so disability justice, one, is looking for explicitly supporting the leadership of people that are living those health experiences and living and lifting up their what most people would think of as a negative, but they have certain experiences. I say we have certain experiences, that are very valuable. And we see that with COVID in terms of people are afraid to get sick. And there are people, I facilitate these groups of disability justice groups. And some of the people said, I've been living like this for years. Maybe they have immunodeficiencies. Some people have certain types of allergic reactions and haven't been eating out and going to restaurants for a couple of years. And so within our community is kind of reframing the health challenges. I took it all the way back to slavery. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you imagine during slavery, as people were getting brutalized, beaten, we had to have a lot of knowledge on how to heal each other. We had to have a lot of knowledge on how to take care of each other. You know what I'm saying? We would have been just wiped. We couldn't have gone to work and did the things that we did. You know what I'm saying? If we didn't know how to take care of each other, how to heal each other, how to help somebody who's, 10% get up to 30% and get up to 50% by the morning time, all of these things. And so I think that COVID is a call for us to dig deep you know, we have this healing in our community, and it's time for us to dig deep and bring that forward. We know how to save each other's lives. You know what I'm saying? We know how to take care of each other. And this is what we need to figure out how to do. And with we have to figure out what it means in this day and age. But I think it's time for us to claim that Tupac, I love Tupac, he's great. But I think he said one of the most harmful things to ever get into our consciousness. He said, I got to get mine, you got to get yours. You know what I'm saying? And that mentality of, you know, you figure it out, whether you live or die, you know what I'm saying? Whatever happens to you, you just figure it out. You know, we gotta turn back the clock on that. You know what I'm saying? We can celebrate, yeah, I'm gonna get mine and you get yours, but that's a relationship. Right. It's not a, you know, I'm turning my back, or, you know, I'm gonna watch you suffer, or what have you.
Or how do we help each other get ours? If you're doing your thing and I'm doing my thing, like, how can I help you advance or move your thing forward if I can help you, right? If I'm focusing on my thing, you focusing on your thing, how can I help you move your thing forward so you can get yours? Like, how can we support you to move forward? What do you think about that? If we want to flip it, of what he said, to have people think about it in a different way.
We need power. We need money. We need organization in order to do that. I mean, I was thinking, I work at Morgan State University. If you go to our website, you'll see some of the COVID, you know, videos that we just have recently produced. Okay, and you know, about wearing a mask. But if you ride around Baltimore today, and I've been told the same for Detroit, that you'll see a lot of Black folks are not wearing masks and are not practicing social distancing, you know, and I don't know why, but that's a big problem, because we can't always blame someone else for stuff that we can do ourselves. So, you know, it's really a nice, noble idea that we should work together, and I'm for that. I mean, I did the toolkit because I thought it was a vehicle to help, you know, low-income minorities empower themselves when dealing with, you know, agencies that were trying to, you know, disregard them as individuals and as a community.
Yeah.
Black people or certain segments of the African American community to read the memo, okay, is I find that very challenging.
And I think to your question, Marnese, about how I think that this is where healing comes into the conversation. You know, we've been trained in many cases. We can go into different comedians and the jokes that they have about Black folks and N-words and all these different things. We've been trained to, you know, when we see each other, what's my man? Nipsey Hussle had this great quote. He used to be a gangbanger, you know, and he talks about as a gangbanger, he was wearing this color and he would be going after the people in another color. And you know, if you weren't dressed in the gang gear, they would leave you alone. But one day he realized, he's like, I'm literally going after my reflection. You know what I'm saying? They're just wearing another color, but I'm going after literally my reflection. The people that walk like me, talk like me, that's who I'm going after, you know? And so I think that that's, I bring it back to healing, because I think that healing is central to where I'm coming from. And a lot of what we're talking about is health, you know, and it may not be thousands of people. It may start in smaller groups that are activated towards healing, but we have to, in addition to the conversation about money and resources, we have to have the conversation about healing, you know, so that we can move in a positive direction with each other.
I totally agree. And
So do I.
To go back to moving our members of our organizations that we're a part of or to, help them get involved to see that environmental and climate justice is a health issue, it's an education issue, it's our legacy, right? Because we have legacy of doing environmental justice work, but it wasn't coined the term. So why do you feel that people are just reluctant to do EJ work? Is it because of the perception of the white thing, say the polar bears, tree huggers, that type of thing? Because to go back to Glenn's profession, he works in transportation. Our kids ride those school buses, right? Our people ride those transportation buses that emit harmful things into the air, and we're on those buses and we're going to have respiratory issues, right? And then we had this big pandemic that's an underlying respiratory issue. So, and it's impacting our communities the most. So it's like, how do we can have these conversations at the same time, healing, organizing, and educating people who are impacted, our people who are impacted by EJ, climate justice issues?
It's a challenge. I think we have to continue having conversations like this, okay? And we need to figure out ways to expand these conversations so we get to a wider audience. But I don't think I have a problem in convincing you or Will, okay, that we ought to be having this conversation. We got to get to Pookie and, and Booty Green and, and Mr. Dibbs. We got to get those guys, because those are the ones who, especially in this COVID situation, they could be dead in 3 weeks, or they could be weakened, and when the second wave comes, it could take them out. Okay, it could affect me. It could affect you if you're walking, close. So how do we, you can't, so we have to, we can't even get them masks. I was on a meeting today, on a Zoom meeting today with the Regional Planning Council, and they were all trying to figure out how to get the care money, how to take that care money to purchase mask and PPPs, 3Ps, the protective equipment. They're trying to figure out how to get funding for that. And they were actually having difficulties in doing it because the governor in Maryland, didn't want to have a moratorium on evictions. So there's going to be evictions as soon as they run out of that, stimulus check. When that's gone and they don't pass another stimulus package, the people who are going to get evicted are going to be people who are living in, low income housing or public assistance housing, and that's primarily African Americans. So I don't know how you reach out, okay, without having resources in order to do that. So my answer is, we have to have more meetings like this. We have to build partnerships with business, government, nonprofits, community people, partnerships that are effective at getting, resources. But as Will said, before you can do that, you probably have to have some spiritual healing.
Yeah. Will, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have the flip side of the coin to this response, and I definitely want to shout you out, Baba Glenn, for your approach in terms of looking at where you came from and then bringing your skills back to your community, and to your approach, Marnese, in terms of how do we address the Black Greek organizations? How do we address the college educated? I want to give a shout out to one of my sisters. Her name is Piper Carter. And we talk about, to put it bluntly, the need to face classism in our communities. And many times people get certain types of education and they view not only as a way to leave their community, but then many times people start to be, honest, start believing some of the same stereotypes that in years past, white people would have been saying about our people, you know what I'm saying? Or blaming them like, oh, we saw this in Detroit, we have a big issue with water shutoffs, and when you get that class difference, then people who don't see themselves as working class or don't see themselves as poor start to say things like, why are you buying gym shoes instead of paying your water bill? Or why are you buying cable instead of paying your water bill? Or saying these different stereotypes and rationalizations. And Piper Carter uses hip hop and culture to reach college educated and middle class people, but engage them and show them that there's a connection with their life and Black people generally and working class people and poor people. And I think that, when Glenn is saying we need money, there are Black people with money all over the spectrum, but the class differences are so distinct that we're not able to pull together and be, on the same team for environmental justice or on the same team for climate justice. So we got to go to a bank, or we got to go to a corporation, or we got to go, to somewhere else. That was one thing my grandmother lamented. Like I said, she was from Georgia. And one of the things that she said was she just lamented about integration, the fact that when she was coming up, there was a multi-class Black community. Mm-hmm. And people, they had to live in the same neighborhood, but because of that, you got to see and rub elbows, and there was this sense of we're all in it together. And she saw in her lifetime, as soon as integration happened and they opened the gate and said, you get to move wherever you want to move, boom, 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 boom. It was not only people move, but then their interests, they started to have interests over here, and they started to look down at the interests over here, and they started to identify over here, and they started to not identify over here. And she really lamented that. And she was like, I don't know what to do. We don't have a Black community anymore, and that really stuck with me. And so I think that the resources are there, but what do we, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do we mobilize that for environmental justice? How do we mobilize that for the well-being of our community is something that's always been on my mind. And I that's why I like this show. And I like this approach that you're having, because that's what you're trying to do, is to reconnect, and say, okay, you've been to college, you're part of these organizations. We're going to draw these links, you know what I'm saying, with the movement. We're going to draw these links with the struggle. So I salute. I love that.
Thank you so much, Will. So our my Triumph of SOAR, Charity Hicks, yes, Eastern Michigan, Pi Delta. She
Ashe.
When I first seen her, I was like, oh my gosh, that's my SOAR. And I was just a baby, like, I want to do this. I want to be like her. And I'm like, if she can do it,
Ashe.
why can't we all do it? She went to school. She went to college, That's the quote unquote the Black bourgeois, right? If you go to college, you get a degree, you get a job, the middle class, upper middle class. That's the class that, Black Greek letter organizations are a part of. So it's like, why will we not lift up people who need help the most just because we so-called made it, right? And I just look at her like she's doing what we all need to be doing in a community. And so are you, Glenn, and so are you, Will. And I want to go to the chat real quick because I got a couple questions.
All right.
Yeah, we gotta learn how to give back. That's the key. Give back.
Shout out to people and for tuning in to Marnese Live Talkshow. I want to say hi to Katrina Cousins in Baltimore. We got someone from Baltimore.
All right.
I see Michael McPherson, Wallace Fam, Selwyn Jones. Okay. I see Meredith and Ashley. Ashley's my sister. If I don't shout her out, she's gonna get me. So the question is, Faith Taylor, she confirmed it's PPE. How can we make the partnerships equitable?
Well, we have to define what the partnership is first.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I'm assuming when we get into these partnerships, how do we ensure that we're not being used by one or more of the partners? And that's a little bit tricky, because if we try to define a partner, if we go looking for partners with money, and the guy brings the money in or the lady brings the money in, they're going to think that they run the show, where they have a great deal of leverage.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to bring in something that's equally valued as a leverage, okay, in order to make sure that, or to ensure that, we don't get taken advantage of. We have to be on the boards. We have to be in positions where they actually are listening to us, okay, speak, and listening to our values, and not just using us because we have black skin, or, we're people of color.
So I have a further question, Glenn, about that. So we won't be used because of our black skin, and we don't get used to, be that quota or check the box for organizations.
That's right.
How do we hold them accountable? I was on a training today, and a lot of white environmental climate justice organizers were on the call, and they were talking about funding and how, quite frankly, why would we give or let our space for funding go to other communities, Black, Brown, EJ organizations? Like our development department is going to laugh at the organizers for, say, hey, you need to be granted these EJ organizations, right? So I'm just curious to know, okay, you want to use our brown face to do some of this work. How do we hold them accountable since they're in the funding spaces?
I think it goes back to your point that you made earlier. We get our degrees, or we succeed in sports or entertainment, but we're in this certain class, okay? And that we're sort of, trying to figure out, how do we, from our particular perch, how do we reach down and help people, okay? So I can use my friends and my connections, who all happen to be white, okay, who may or may not do anything. What we need to be able to do is to reach out to, the folks in our community who look like us, who have money and resources, and who are interested in the campaigns that we are trying to promote. So I don't know that we've done that. We do that certainly on, a one-to-one basis, or we do that when we have cotillions and, certain social events, in our class society, but we don't reach down enough. Okay, I'm not saying that we don't at all, but I don't think we do it enough, where we get the Michael Jordans of the world to pitch in and to, become a force, in its own right. I don't think we do enough of that. We're always looking for others to help us.
So we should go within our Black community, celebrities, even leverage the professions, our own members of our fraternities and sororities.
We have to build, and it's going to be difficult. You know how it is working with your family. But we have to, maybe through music. I don't know. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think we're not doing enough of it.
Okay. Will, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think two things, which they're kind of the same thing. One, I think that coming from our communities, we have to stop making it seem like they're doing us a favor. Like when it comes to environmentalism, like a lot of these organizations, they got money, but they don't know what they're doing. What problems have they solved? Ask, what accomplishments have they made? What, if they have millions of dollars, what has their millions of dollars accomplished? And I think that when you look at our communities and you look at, the thinkers and the way that our communities are looking at, economics and society and all these problems, people are lost right now. You know, and I think that a lot of the white people and a lot of the institutions without money can't admit that, because that's kind of scary for them to admit that their things aren't really working and they're just kind of spinning their wheels.
Okay.
And so I think that one is not just a charity case. Like, we're not saying support us for charity or support us to be nice. We're saying we have, in many cases, we have better ideas coming out of our communities that are more deeper in the reality. You know, I work with white college students, and you don't know how many literally talk about coming to Detroit. They understand America much better. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're like, wow, I was lied to my whole life. And now there's some truth that I see from being here. You know what I'm saying? And so it's not, so part of the accountability is like Glenn is saying with that leverage, it's like, yo, we have strategies to offer. We have a deep perspective that's gonna, in many cases, work deeper. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, just like this COVID thing, you know, like, yeah, everybody's scared of COVID, but it's like our community is feeling it deeper.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And if there were to be a real national response, our community should be at the forefront of that, because we would kind of see how people are falling through the cracks and come up with a solution. You see what I'm saying? That can respond to that. And very concretely, for those who are working with majority white organizations, you may have heard of it or you may not, but there's this thing called the Jemez Principle, Jemez. And many times, Black organizations or people of color organizations, they use that as a very concrete tool to work with majority white organizations. And if they can come to agreement on the principles, then they can say, okay, we agreed with this. Are you in line with this, or are you not in line with this? And if they can't agree with it, then that kind of shows you who you're working for. And then you have another decision to make. You know, if you're working with people that don't want to agree on the principles, then you have to come back and figure out, okay, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying? What does that mean if they don't want to agree with us on our principles?
Right.
And so
Can you repeat that? Jemez? What is it?
Yeah, Jemez. It sounds like Jemez, but it's pronounced Jemez.
Uh-huh.
And it was very similar that people were, I think it was in the 90s, you know, people were really wrestling with these questions that we're talking about now. You know, these majority white environmental organizations just had millions of dollars and were making money sometimes off of our community. And so they came up with these principles, and now people have been using them. It doesn't always work perfectly, but like you said, Marnese, it's that, you know, if we can agree to it, then we can talk about how oh no, you didn't live up to this thing you agreed to, you know. Right. Then we have something to talk about.
Right.
You know, a lot of times when money comes into an African American community, a low income African American community, it results, say, for housing and economic development, it results in gentrification.
Right.
Yeah.
So a lot of folks will say, well, I don't want to be gentrified. I don't want my neighborhood gentrified.
Yeah.
But so what happens if I say, I don't want my neighborhood to be gentrified? The money, you know, goes away because of that resistance, and nothing ever happens positive in my neighborhood. So to me, that's a dilemma that we face, because you know, if a white organization comes into our neighborhood, it's gentrification. But if a Black organization comes in and does the same thing, then is it economic development, or is it something different? It's still classist, in my opinion. So I don't know how to, you know, so you have these programs that, you know, affordable housing, you know, better transportation, transit-oriented development, that are all designed to filter in, you know, some kind of, you know, mitigation so that low-income people can benefit from it without being, you know, forced out. But I think so that we need to focus on those types of programs and work a lot harder to make sure that we have a voice in how they get implemented, if they are going to be implemented at all.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I would like to make sure that we leave our audience members with some type of action items before we leave, because there's no point in having a talk show if we don't start doing something. It's like we're just talking just to talk, you know? So could you guys provide our audience members some action steps on how to advocate for equitable transportation, how to get into the environmental justice movement, how to organize, just some basic things that people who are not Pookie and Ray Ray them, as you mentioned, how can they get involved with the movement? How can Black Greek-led organizations go ahead and start taking charge and use our 100 million members to start taking on these issues as a collective? Can you guys give us some action steps?
You want me to take? Well, there are organizations out there that we can get involved in that are, multiracial groups like the Environmental Justice Listserv. I think you would know about that, Marnese, right? The Environmental Justice Listserv.
I've never heard of that.
You've never heard of? Well, that's where a lot of the community exists. The Robert Bullets of the world, and I'm on there. A lot of old timers are there. I could send you a link, or if you just Google, EJ Listserv, LISTSERV, you'll see it, and you can ask to get on. That's one way of keeping up with what's going on in that community. Okay, and it's also a way of influencing what goes on in that community. So I think that's a good way to not only get information, establish new contacts. Okay, I also think that having leadership forums and figuring out ways that we can reach the 100 million, or just a good, chunk of it, would go a long way. But I do think that, that we're going to be okay. I mean, it's a good chance we're going to survive. We're going to be healthy. We're going to live nice old ages to, retire. Okay. But there's an underclass in our community that may not. And that's the class that we all have come from. We have roots in it. William, you talked about your grandparents coming from Georgia. Mine came from the Eastern Shore, and plantations in Pennsylvania. Yeah, there were plantations in Pennsylvania, and somehow they figured out how to, make a living and to give their children a better life, and and so we have to still, we have to cultivate or continue to cultivate that, and not let that get lost, such that we're saying, well, that's their problem and not my problem. I made it.
Yeah.
So we have to. We have a lot of work to do. We're still there?
Yeah, we're still here.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead, William. That was my. I don't want.
Yeah, I definitely hope that groups, college chapters or graduate chapters, want to get more involved. And I would say, wherever you're at, it might take a few months, but first learn and see what the particular issues, what the particular problems are there. And there probably are people that are working on them in your particular area. You know what I'm saying? And so don't just rush in and, try to go. But, take some time. People who've been to college know how to do a little bit of research, you know what I'm saying? And find out who these voices are. Some of the things you could do, people would love, I know our organization, we've worked with some people, would love fundraisers. You know what I'm saying? Like if your chapter wanted to do a fundraiser for whatever that local organization is, they would love it. You know what I'm saying? And you want to do a step show fundraiser, you want to do a suit and tie fundraiser, however you do it, a banquet or auction, do it your way in conjunction with them. I'm sure that they would love it, and so that's one thing. Even like putting some informational materials, like how can you use your email blasts or things like that to give information that's coming from these people that are involved in your local areas. And there's two things that I'm involved. I'll just kind of say the names real quick because I've alluded to one of them. In Detroit, there's a big issue with water shutoffs right now. And if people look up the Detroit People's Water Board, especially with this virus, everybody's talking about washing your hands, you know what I'm saying? But thousands of people have had their water shutoffs in their home, and the People's Water Board has been working for years to restore water in people's homes and can always use more support. And then I'm working on this program called Wilds Beyond Climate Justice. And the website is just Wilds Beyond Climate Justice, which is really taking a look at what are the shortcomings of our current climate model and how can we create new models for the future. And that's going to be at the end of May. I think the dates are May 31st through June 4th. Totally online, totally webinar. So those are the two specific things, People's Water Board and Wilds Beyond Climate Justice, just to shout out those specific initiatives.
Thank you so much, Will. Okay, so before we go, I would like to thank Will and Glenn for coming on to the Marnese Live Talk Show, and hopefully you all will come back on so we can have a deeper conversation. I want to give a shout out to Munchie's Coney Island. It's a family Coney Island if you're in the Waterford Pontiac area. They are doing delivery with a minimal purchase of $10 with $2.50 delivery charge. So it's on 2548 Elizabeth Lake Road in Waterford, Michigan. And then if you're looking to get your picture taken, please reach out to Sakara Jackson. She is doing photo sessions starting June 2020. 6 feet away, she can take your picture. And so no limit on poses, choices, cap and gown. So please reach out to Sakara Jackson. I'd like to make sure I'm lifting up Black businesses. All right. And so next week, tuning into the Marnese Live Talk Show, we will have the essence of mommyhood conversation with some mothers, auntie mothers, grandmothers, military mothers, single mothers about motherhood. And so I would like to say happy Mother's Day to all moms and mothers who play those roles. It's coming up this weekend. Happy Mother's Day to my mother. She's pictured right there, Lois Lee Youngblood Jackson. I love you dearly, and I hope you see this because I told you I was going to give you a shout out. And if you want to continue to be action oriented, please call Jackie Johnson, the district attorney of Glenn County, for the murder of Mr. Arbery. So you can see this information is also posted on the Marnese Live Talk Show. And to be quite honest, I'm tired of having hashtags, so we have to do something about this. We have so many issues going on at the same time. They're all intersectional, and we as the Black community have to really start taking charge. So please call Ms. Jackie Johnson so we can put these murderers behind bars. So I want to say thank you so much for watching the Marnese Live Talk Show. Please don't forget to subscribe to Marnese on the Marnese Live Talk Show on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and Instagram. And so before we leave, I'm going to play a video by Mr. William Copeland. And Mr. William Copeland, can you please tell us about the video that I'm going to play?
This is Take the House Back, right?
Yes.
Take the House Back. Man, I was so struck by the work of the Housing as a Human Right Coalition in Detroit, helping to move families and mothers into abandoned houses, galvanizing neighborhood support so that the neighborhood who didn't want too many abandoned houses in their neighborhood would support these families being moved in. And then we saw similar tactics being used in Oakland, California, with the single mothers moving and taking over houses there. We have so many abandoned houses and so many people that don't have homes. And it's time to put those two together and make solutions so that people can stay safe and warm.
Great. So thank you so much, Will, for that. And I just say support the work that Will is doing, and also reach out to Glenn if you want to do more advocacy work around transportation equity, because that is a part of the Green New Deal. And transportation is the main emitter of climate change. Our kids are on school buses, we ride the buses. So please reach out to me, and I'm more than welcome will share their information. So I'm going to play this video, and thanks so much for tuning in to the Marnese Live Talkshow.
The moral imperative that relates to whether or not people have a right to live inside of a house.
Take the houses back, 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 take the houses back. They belong to the people, take the houses back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. We don't gotta go get nobody's mouse trapped. We got what we need in our community. Grab the keys in your hand, unlock that. Get a crowbar and just rock that. Let's meet at the bank and just crowd that. So at least that we know where the power's at right here. Making houses, turn them into homes. Let your mental roam like a signal phone. It's true indeed, there's a human need. People on the street and the crib's empty. This ain't no baby, babe, ain't no ass to shake. Just to open and bail, get the class away. Cause we mad as hell, man, it's cold as hell. We some northern soldiers, they made us yell. To my southern cousins, let's take it there. On the coast, provoke, protect your peace. Occupy our homes, let's play for keeps. Let's roll the dice, this game is deep. Take abandoned lots, make them garden plots. Then guard them plots, cause the block is hot. Unbar the lots, then watch for cops. When we get together, we're hard to stop. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. We don't gotta go get nobody's mouse trap. We got what we need in our community. Grab the keys in your hand, unlock that. Get a crowbar and just rock that. Let's meet at the break and just crowd that. So at least that we know where the power's at.
Cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The needs of the many must always outweigh the needs of the few.
We got the mamas, papas, attorneys, rockers, kids in the fosters, vets and doctors, black flag activists, gramps and nomads, grannies, big old families, oh man.
If we can't fix the problem this way, or this way, as legal, we have no trouble in doing illegal. Not none at all. We flip over like it ain't nothing.
Everybody need a place to kick back. When you get yours, then it's time to give back. Say we can't wait, man, get your rebate, man. Everybody eating, come grab your plate, man. My granny and my uncle and my aunt used to share a crib. Where you live, it's no embarrassment. There you is. She got a house when she wrote that check, and he got a house, went to court and shit. They kept their spot when the folks protest. My man got his spot for $1 and a lease. When the bank's foreclosure game ain't over, I came to the office, they marched like soldiers. Like, what's wrong, baby girl? Bring your doll back. Grab your gym shoes, your bike, bring it all back. No trouble, baby brother, grab your ball back. Get your comic books, come on, grab all that. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. Take the house back, baby, take the house back. We don't gotta go get nobody's mouse trap. We got what we need in our community. Grab the keys in your hand, unlock that. Get a crowbar and just rock that. Let's meet at the bank and just crowd that. So at least that we know where the power's at right here.
The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down. The cost of living is going up. Chances of living are going down.
That was nice.